Actually, the president probably knows less than many other members, but the other members have other commitments. I'm mostly retired, which allows me time to be president. The president is just for 1 year. But I do know a little bit about recreational fisheries other than being a recreational fisherman. I've got 2 or 3 tables that I want to focus on about data that I've acquired mostly through the web, and you can go on the web and find the same sort of thing. These are not my research. But just to give you an idea how important recreational fishing is in the United States. And it's the United States of America, not America, because there are 2 continents in America. And I really don't like calling our country America. That's just a personal quirk I have. But I want to impress that I'm using data from several different sources, and they're all somewhat different in their estimates because they have different sources of data and they analyze the data somewhat differently. So you don't deal a lot with the individual numbers, but get a gross idea of what these numbers are. So as far as the number of anglers in the United States of America, this data from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is both freshwater and marine. Marine is going to focus a lot more on marine data. Down here is another estimate there, probably not hers, but there's somewhere around 30 million people in the United States of America that go fishing. And that's about 10% of the population. 1 in 10 people go fishing. As far as the number of trips, over 400,000 in freshwater alone. That's probably, it could be just 1 day, it could be a week or whatever. Marine is different, far fewer. The actual direct sales in billions of US dollars, or the total in freshwater marine, something like 40 million, marine only 30 million. This outfit estimates something like $20 million. And I don't know what that translates to other economic sources in the United States. But to me, 20 to 40 billion dollars is a big number. I mean, that's more than I make in a year. The economic impact, which is, these are direct sales, these are multipliers that factor in the money that's made when people come and spend stuff and how that rotates and churns. It's somewhere around 100 billion. These folks figure 60 billion. Marine maybe 80 billion. But again, large numbers. We're all concerned about jobs. Somewhere around 800,000 jobs to 500,000 jobs. So again, there are a lot of people in the United States of America, but this is a lot of jobs. And I think that's something we have to emphasize, and that's a key focus of this workshop. That this means a lot of money, it means employment. We're not talking anything about the human pleasure that comes from fishing, which is equally important, but we can't really put a number of dollars on that very well. Maybe Sabrina can. Focusing now on some states, and I chose 3 states that are something like the Nordic countries. In fact, if you haven't been to these states, you can go there and you will find people of Nordic ancestry. They'll be speaking with a Nordic accent. And the landscape will look a lot like this landscape, the same kind of geology, the same kind of vegetation. So you'll feel at home if you haven't been there. So the number of anglers in these 3 states, about 300,000 in Alaska, around 1 million in both Michigan and Minnesota. The population of those states are here, but these are the percents. In other words, in Alaska, about 40% of the people that live there go fishing. Nearly half. And they do that because it's an important source of food. They're not just fishing for recreation there. In Michigan, around 14%. In Minnesota, around 25, 26%. So these percents, in other words, are a little bit higher than the average in the United States. They're certainly higher in Alaska because the fishing there is really good. And if you haven't been fishing in a place that when you walk in the stream, the fish have to move, that's where that is. The streams are so full of fish that they fill the banks during the spawning migration. And therefore it's easy to go fishing there. And they don't call it fishing, they call it catching. When you go fishing, you go catching. It means money, as far as billions, 0.2 billion in Alaska, 0.6 billion in Michigan, and 1.2 billion in Minnesota. And wages, as far as the people that are actually employed fishing there. Economic impact, again, these multipliers, anywhere from 0.6 to $4 billion. And I put an asterisk here because I want to emphasize that in Minnesota, the agency that does the regulation and the enforcement of the laws has a $30 million budget. But it churns out $4 billion worth of net economic income. That's a 133 multiplier. So for every dollar that is put into managing the fisheries, you get $133 back. Now, find another industry that does that. Not many. And of course you have jobs created by this, anywhere from 5 to 33,000 jobs. Okay, focusing down where I live in the winter is between these two rivers. And these are important fishing rivers for sustainable fishery or catch and release fishery. The Henry's Fork in Idaho, the South Fork of the Snake River that flows between Wyoming and Idaho. Fishing is done there just in the summer season, May to October. This is the number of angler days, around 150 to 200,000. Creates anywhere from 300 to 800 jobs. The income in the county is anywhere from 12 million in the South Fork, 29 million in the Henry's Fork. That amount, in the second most important economic sector in the county, is agriculture. It only produces about $2 million to the county. The county is a pretty small geographic area. Point is that this is more important than this. This covers about half the land. Half the land in the county is composed of agricultural land. These are just a couple of streams that flow through that land, and they produce a lot more money than that. If you ask the anglers what the value of these fisheries are, they value it at around $15 million. That's the cost that they are willing to pay to go fishing and catch a fish, especially wild, native, Yellowstone cutthroat trout, beautiful fish, not a salmon, but a big fish, and catch them and release them. So I've tried to give you some impression of the importance of fishing, recreational fishing at national level, state level, and in this case, county or local level. So it's important economic. And I also wanted to cover a little bit of how we manage fisheries in the United States. We have regulations that cover the times you can fish during the day, the days you can fish, what kind of gear you use, what size and number of fish you can catch. And my understanding is that a lot of the Nordic countries lack those sorts of regulations. It's regulated by 3 different entities: the National Marine Fisheries Service, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and state fish and wildlife agencies. Most of those work is focused on commercial and recreational fisheries, some distance from the coastlines, and certainly they're after marine and anadromous fishes, especially those that are listed as endangered or threatened. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service focuses on freshwater threatened and endangered species. They also provide some assistance to hatcheries throughout the country. But most of the actual work and regulation is done by the state fish and wildlife agencies in each of the 50 states. Their responsibilities are marine species that are near the coast as well as freshwater species. In addition to the agencies that actually focus on managing fish, there are a whole bunch of federal agencies that cover the lands that the streams and the lakes exist in. And each of those have fish biologists that they hire, quite a few of them in fact, and they manage what people can do with the land, and that affects the fish, as others have spoken about. Where do we get the money? In the States, the great proportion of money comes from license sales. And in my mind, the licenses are pretty expensive. $30 to $50 for a resident license. About, what you pay for a good dinner. And you can go fishing all year. There's some money that come out of state and federal appropriations. There are a couple of states, Minnesota's one, Missouri is another one, that they have a small tax on anything you buy, a percentage of anything you buy, and that money goes to a Fish and Wildlife Fund for improvement of habitat. Another interesting source of money is a federal excise tax on fishing gear and motorboat fuel. And that is turned back to the states depending on the amount of angling licenses they have in that state. And each year it runs between $50 to $400 million of tax that the states can use. And it funds these sorts of activities. So you've got license sales, some federal appropriations, and then this tax. How do we manage fish? Probably the same way that folks do in the Nordic countries. We manage stocks and populations, ecologically significant units, smaller areas, species, and we certainly study population dynamics so we understand how many fish are there over what periods of time. At harvest, we supplement a good deal with hatcheries, spend a good deal of money on physical, chemical, and biological habitat improvements. Unfortunately, we do not evaluate the effects of those very well at all. So we don't know if the money we're putting into that produces much in the way of fish or an economic return. We monitor and assess the status and trends of fisheries, mostly through angler surveys, both marine and freshwater. And we work through many agencies to reduce the stresses and pressures on physical and chemical habitat. Since I'm president of the American Fisheries Society, I thought I'd say a little bit about our society, which I think is important. I don't know if you have professional fisheries societies in the Nordic countries or not, so I'm speaking out of total ignorance. But we have an important role. We were funded, or began in 1870, as the American Fish Culturalist Association, meaning that the major focus was hatcheries. But that year that we first formed, we advocated for a U.S. Commission for Fish and Fisheries led by a fish scientist. Not just a politician, nothing against politicians, but the person that headed that agency had to know something about fish. I don't know of any other agency. The Forest Service doesn't have a department for foresters. We have anywhere from 7,000 to 9,000 members, depending on the year. We represent 62 different nations. We publish 6 scientific journals, and we have 73 current book titles. So if you want to buy books or journals about fish or fishing or fisheries, it's a place to go. Some examples of pertinent books. We have standard names so that if you want to call a fish anywhere in North America from Mexico to Canada, we've got a name that we can translate. And then several of these on actually how to manage fish, and how to study fish. And as I mentioned, we publish 6 different journals. And I would encourage you, if you've got something that you think might be of interest to people in North America, to submit it to our journals. I think our members would be interested in learning about some of the stuff that we're talking about here. And that's it. Thank you.